Hello, hello, hello. It's time for another flagship This Week in Geek episode. This week on the show, we have 3 reviews for you. We've got Judgment, the PS5 version that's built from the ground up to take advantage of next-gen hardware. A sort of collection of accessories for the Oculus Quest 2 from VR Cover, as well as Wraith The Oblivion Afterlife, the Oculus Quest 2, with a little bit of the Rift version as well. So it's sort of VR focused with a little bit of Sega action in here. As for the news, we have 3 stories brought to you from Birdman's collecting and sourcing from all around the interwebs. Same goes for the weird news, 3 stories as well. It's going to be another shorter episode as I will be visiting family this weekend, helping take care of my grandmother for about 4 or 5 days to give a little reprieve for the rest of the family that way. Just sort of keeping an eye on things, but also it's been about a month since I had my first vaccination shot, so things have settled in. She's had hers, so it's time that we can get together and actually visit again, which is nice. And I won't be anywhere near my recording equipment, didn't want to lug it around with me there, so we recorded all these elements a little earlier, sporadically throughout the week, with the news being sort of the last thing we pulled together. So that'll be coming. So without further ado, let's get into our first review here, and then we'll be back with the news.
This is a fair request, and I promise I will not judge any person only as a teenager, and that this is no more right than saying all teenagers are drunken dope addicts or glue sniffers.
Back a couple of years ago, we had a review copy of Judgment sent to us from Sega. Judgment being the side story or Yakuza game that's not a Yakuza game, where you play as a lawyer turned private detective set in the Yakuza world. And we really liked it, but at the time, I remember noting that it was a very difficult game to run even on my PlayStation 4 Pro, and that I had to force the system to turn off, not allow any HDR mode, which I don't believe it was using, but I just forced it off, and I had to turn off super sampling and drop it down to 1080p just to run it, because it was making the system chug pretty hard. And my system was clean. I made sure I maintained, airflow and everything. It was just a game that had a hard time maintaining its frame rate. It felt like it was dropping below 30 on the regular. There were load time issues with it, where it would take a somewhat substantial time to get around and do things, especially if you failed a mission. And this is just sort of a quick review, because we've had the opportunity now to check out the PlayStation 5 version. Now, your save files don't carry over, so you do have to start from scratch, because I was like, hey, how come can I import it? Can I do anything? Unfortunately not. But what's included is absolutely everything that was a DLC item is included, and you can actually open up a mailbox right at the beginning of the game and pretty much redeem almost everything. You can get a whole bunch of kitty cats to decorate your building with, as well as a brand new update to the graphics engine. I'm going to assume it's using an update of the engine that's similar to Yakuza Like a Dragon. We'll have to wait for somebody more technical to check out if that's the case. But the tone and coloring and everything is much more appealing to the eye. The other one might have had, the previous version might have gone for a slightly more realistic look, but it was more aliased. This has a better use of color mapping and just the textures look a little more cohesive. Yeah, it's a little more video gamey, but that's actually a good thing in this instance. Audio-wise, it's indistinguishable. I can't tell any difference, and I have a good sound system both in for surround and for headphones. I can't tell, playing a little back-to-back, whether there was a difference in the voice acting or any changes that were made that way. It sounds pretty much like that was spot on. There might be some corrections that they have done in the background that we don't know about. They apparently fixed a bunch of glitches and some hot fixes and things, which is always good. The big overhaul has been to the graphical engine. That way it now does HDR by default, at least on my PlayStation I can see, and the tone mapping is great. The big thing here is going to be that it seems to be, and again, I could be corrected, we'll probably see somebody like Digital Foundry put out a video, but it looks like it's 4K 60 locked, at least on my system. Maybe it's 1440 upscaled or something, but it seems to be running at full resolution locked, and I was jumping back and forth between playing the PS4 version and playing because I can install the PS4 version as well, and the PS5 version on my PS5, and it seems to be of higher fidelity. So great. As far as anything else other than the visual upgrade, including all the DLC, the game seems to be a little smaller in size, probably taking advantage of the PS5 being on an SSD where they can just locate files quicker than having to duplicate them across multiple folders. But also, it's a lot faster to load. And when I say a lot faster, I mean it feels a lot faster. If you fail on one of your chase missions previously, you'd be looking at 20 or 30 seconds till it got you back. It's like 2 seconds. Going in and out of buildings, loading, it almost feels like it's fading to black to go to a load screen just for the sake of not having it be jarring to you. Like it's already probably preloaded in the background before you even do anything. It's whisper quiet on the system. Nothing seems to be taxing it. There's no judder. I didn't encounter any frame rate drops while I was playing my playthrough of this. It includes so many little tweaks here and there that I can tell it's a very well put together title. It's also now available on the Xbox Series X and S as well as Google Stadia, and that's good because it's going to be out for more people, which is something that previously you were looking at a PlayStation exclusive. Which I mean, of course, I'm not a fanboy, but like I always like it when a game can get the most out of an engine on a system. But if it's gone to use the new Yakuza Like a Dragon engine, that was made for multi-platform anyway. So I can see why they would do that, no problem. Especially if it's as optimized now as it was, much more now than it was before. It's also retailing at a cheaper price. Now, in the States, depending on your store, your mileage may vary, but when it came out initially, it was, in Canada, I believe, a $79 game. Now, so that would, so $79.99. I remember looking at that. I have my old price guide here. The PlayStation 5 version and Series X version, if you look on Amazon or any other retailer in Canada, it's retailing for $54.99, so $55. So it is like a definitive edition, even though it's not saying that on the cover. You get all the DLC, you get all the DLC, you get updated visuals, massively improved graphical engine and loading engine and data streaming engine. Probably some tweaks to audio that I didn't notice. Some tweaks to gameplay, and it just runs so much better at a smaller file size, and it's $20 cheaper than it was before. So $25 or so. Definitely worth it, especially if you didn't play it the first time around because it was getting pretty late in the PlayStation 4 life cycle. Or if you're an Xbox gamer, pick it up. There are a lot of people that might not know because a lot of the Yakuza titles are available now, on other platforms as well, that this is actually part of it. So it might be a good jumping on point because you don't necessarily need to have played any of the previous Yakuza titles to enjoy this. This could be a good one-off to let you see if you like this style of gameplay, and then you can jump into one of the other titles. So they did a really good job of doing a fully optimized version for next gen here on the PlayStation 5. Definitely check it out.
The Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
Gossip, rumors, panic in the streets. We're lucky.
This Week in Geek
News.
Alrighty, it's news time. So we have 3 stories here gathered by Birdman himself. The first one comes to us from comicbook.com, their gaming division, and it says FIFA 21 leaked document claims EA is pushing players to buy loot boxes. A leaked internal document from Electronic Arts seems to indicate the publisher is trying to push more players to embrace FIFA 21's loot boxes. No shit, Sherlock. The 54-page document is an internal presentation that was provided to CBC's Canada newsroom from a gaming insider, in quotes. According to the document, EA is doing everything it can to drive players towards FIFA Ultimate Team, or FUT, for short, It's a mode where players can build a team using cards, which they can acquire through paid card packs, or also known as loot boxes. While FUT is a separate mode, the presentation states that the company plans to funnel players towards the FUT from other modes. In a second internal document provided to CBC, EA refers to currency earned in-game as grind currency. While grinding tends to be a fairly common term in gaming, the man who leaked the documents claims its use shows EA is aware that the way players earn currency in the game is supposed to be a chore in order to convince them to spend instead. Grinding in video games is slang for doing some monotonous task over and over again to the point where it's no longer fun. I mean, we all know it sort of originated back in the JRPG and RPG, boom of the early to mid 90s. It says it seems like EA games are designed to be boring, to be a grind, and to encourage people of all ages to spend money on card packs. The outlet has agreed not to share the leaker's identity for fear of retribution. The person claims that he and others in the industry are not comfortable with the use of loot boxes in games. Loot boxes have long been a source of controversy in the gaming industry, with some claiming that the practice is similar to gambling and just as addictive, which I think pretty much anybody with common sense knows that's essentially what it is. CBC reached out to EA for comment, and a spokesperson claimed that the documents are being viewed without context. Bullshit. All EA games can be played without spending on in-game items, and the majority of players do not spend. Charlie Fortescue told CBC in a statement. This is not the first time that loot boxes have caused controversy for EA. In 2017, Star Wars Battlefront 2 released to heavy criticism when players discovered it gave those that spent more on the game a distinct advantage over those that didn't. This is an example of pay to win, and it was even more egregious as players had already spent $60 for the game. The move received so much condemnation that EA completely changed the way loot boxes worked in Battlefront 2 as a result. It's impossible to say whether or not the documents will have a similar impact on EA's plans for FIFA 21. While most gamers won't be shocked to learn that EA is making efforts to steer more players towards in-game purchases, the insider was surprised by how blatant these documents are. For years, they've been able to act with a layer of plausible deniability, the insider told CBC, yet in their internal documents, they're saying, this is our goal. We want people driven to card pack mode. Do you purchase loot boxes or card packs in video games? Do you think that the practice is harmful? Yada, yada, yada. You can contact them, reach out. This might be the tipping point where they have to reevaluate their entire business model, because this will be something that might make people actually use their wallets and not buy their games. We'll have to see how it turns out, but I could see the Canadian government deeming it harmful, especially if there's new legislative bills coming out on media that could be deemed harmful to Canadians with broad, very broad scope, that they could just say, okay, that's now gambling, that's now basically junk mail and harassment and ways to hook minors on gambling. And they could just ban it outright. The mode will just not exist in Canada. And if we do it, I know some European countries already have. If enough countries follow suit, they'll have to just abandon it. And if they want to argue that that they're just going to raise the price to like $100 for the games, guess what? Some other company will come out with other games and that people will play that are cheaper, and it will force the industry to change how they think about it. They have these exorbitant costs for these games. They don't cost that much to develop when you consider that it's the same game with a slight refresh of an engine and just monetary things attached to it. It's essentially a slot machine, the whole game. So they can't be spending a lot. The return on investment is insane for it, and it should be regulated. So, I mean, that's my opinion, but I think anybody, with a moderate amount of scrutiny looking at it will go, hey, this doesn't seem right. So our second story here of 3 is from Superhero Hype, and this is The World of Darkness universe is coming to film and television. So another beloved tabletop gaming series is getting live-action treatment. According to Variety, Paradox Entertainment is developing a shared universe based on the World of Darkness franchise. The universe will span both movies and TV. Created by Mark Ryan Hagen and originally released through White Wolf Publishing, the World of Darkness line has been around since 1991. In fact, the series actually comprises several different games featuring a variety of supernatural creatures, all of which clash with humans in a gothic spin on the real world. Its catalog includes Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, and Hunter the Reckoning. The games have reached a wider audience thanks to novels, comic books, and video games, and in 1996, Fox aired a TV series based on the Masquerade called Kindred the Embraced. However, the show only lasted 8 episodes. Didn't it only last 8 episodes because one of the main characters died? Like, suddenly, and the ratings weren't enough to really fix that? I know it was one of the more sought-out DVD releases back in the day, and it was really well done for the time. So, yeah, and I know, before reading the rest of this, recently there's been an uptick in games produced. The Werewolf... The Werewolf the Apocalypse game that came out recently that we reviewed was really good for a low budget but very polished and scoped game. It was really good. And in this week's show, depending on where this is airing, review first, review after, I have a review of the new Oculus VR title based on the Wraith of the Oblivion franchise. So I can see that it's starting to steamroll through. So moving on with the article here, spearheading the new World of Darkness cinematic universe are married writer-producer Eric Heisreiter and Christine Boylan. Heisreiter currently serves as showrunner executive producer for Netflix Shadow and Bone. He also received an Oscar nod for Best Adapted Screenplay for writing Denis Villeneuve's Arrival in 2016. Meanwhile, Boylan has previously worked as a writer-producer on shows like The Punisher, Cloak and Dagger, and Once Upon a Time. These couple are working with Hivemind, the studio behind The Witcher and The Expanse, on World of Darkness projects. The World of Darkness, it gives a little backstory here. But yeah, so I could see it working. They would be smart not to do like tons of big budget movies, but if they did like maybe the Marvel thing where it was miniseries, like 8 episode seasons, like introduce one for each world and then have them sort of connect in some way and have some flow over here and there, and then maybe do a couple movies. Vampires are kind of done to death lately, so maybe starting with... They're going to want to do Vampire and Werewolf first, but I do think that that's sort of been played to death recently. So maybe the way to go would be with something like Hunter or Wraith first, and then introduce the rest of them. But I have a feeling that if they're going to do like feature films, it'll probably be Vampire and Werewolf, and the other 3 will be delegated to doing longer form stories as far as television goes. So that's kind of neat. I mean, we're probably looking at 2 to 5 years before we actually see any results out of this. But we'll see. And our final story, Birdman grabbed from Comic Book. This is from the gaming part of the site as well. Star Wars Battlefront 3 leaked, reportedly reveals first look at game. A new leak has reportedly revealed our first look at Star Wars Battlefront 3, which has been in and out of the rumor mill the past year, but still hasn't been announced or revealed by DICE or EA. Unfortunately, the leak itself isn't as exciting as first look suggests, as it doesn't reveal any gameplay, characters, or anything very substantial. Rather, it reveals our first and supposed look at the game's lineup, game's map, or more specifically, its Coruscant map, planet from Return of the Jedi, which we all know about. Unfortunately, the leak in question doesn't reveal how the map looks like in-game, but reveals a piece of it that shows a skyline that is very much in development, and it can be viewed at the link they provided. That said, though the image is slightly underwhelming, it's accompanied by some details. According to the leaker, the game will be marketed alongside the Coruscant map and Ahsoka, similar to how Battlefront 2 was marketed with Maul and Naboo, and Battlefront with AT-AT and Hoth. Adding to this particular point, the leaker claims Ahsoka will be based on her appearance in The Mandalorian, with Rosario Dawson doing the voice work. The leak also relays word of the following: the return to co-op with reduced XP gain, a reworked version of the Star Card system, a new loadout system, and a merger of the Starfighter Assault and Galactic Assault. As for all this information, it comes from an anonymous source, so take it with a grain of salt. We don't usually talk about rumors on here, but we're getting close to E3 time, so it wouldn't surprise me. Typically, this information wouldn't be worth acknowledging given the nature of the source, but given that it's accompanied by an image that seemingly passes the sniff test, it's been making the rounds. At the moment of publishing, none of the implicated parties, DICE or EA, have commented on this leak. If this changes, we will be sure to provide a story update accordingly, yada yada. For more information, click here. I believe it. I think people are going to be holding their breath as to whether or not they return to more loot box bullshit, seeing as what we've heard going on lately there. But if it's balanced well, this could be fun, especially if it's based on an engine that's specifically tailored to scale properly to the next gen. We're still a year or two away from a lot of these third-party companies developing these kind of games with just the new console target in mind. But if it scales well, like if we're going to get a mode here that does Battlefront in 4K 60 or 1080p 120, that would be pretty sweet. And not having like any slowdown or anything, that would be nice on modern consoles. And that's going to do it for the news. It's short and sweet. And there may be more stuff that I might discuss either at the end of the show, probably in a recap sort of, because after we recorded some of the news segments here, I'm sure that there's more stuff that's come in, because I know there's State of Play and a few other things coming. We are recording this segment early because I will be out of town and not able to record with my equipment for the regular recording time for the show. So let's get into the next review, and then we'll be back with our weird news.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Hold that thought. It's crapper time.
In the last few weeks, we've been finally on the VR train with an Oculus Quest 2 unit to check out. And we were looking at some of the accessories that are available because it comes fairly bare bones. The strap isn't super duper comfortable. The face mask isn't great. They come with a spacer for if you have glasses, but it's not 100% perfect. But you sort of, you get what you pay for, in that it's a $400 device, whereas almost every other VR headset is upwards of $1,000, plus you have to buy a computer to make it work. So you're looking at 3 or 4 times the cost of the headset. So I wanted to look out and see what was out there, and I looked at a few different companies that were out there, and what seemed to have the most traction as far as popularity was a company called VR Cover. And in reaching out to them, they said, hey, yeah, sure, we'll send you some of the accessory gear you can check out and talk about on your show and review. And I went, okay, so what we received is a facial interface and foam replacement set for the Oculus Quest 2, and then also controller grips, a headset strap replacement, and an XL spacer. So I'll give one note that the XL spacer for the Quest 2, it works with the stock like mask that comes with it. It doesn't currently work with the facial interface, so it depends. You can sort of swap in and out, with what you think is most comfortable for you in your case. But it does give a fair bit of extra room when using the stock, like all the stock accessories and face kit that comes with it. And I found that it gave my head a little bit more breathing room when I was wearing my glasses, because I have a fairly big head and I have fairly wide king size glasses. So fitting them within was almost touching the edges, and just that little extra bit of room made a big difference there. So in some cases, as a sample, you might want to just pick up that XL spacer, because the one that comes with the Oculus isn't really enough for most cases. I think with people who wear glasses, especially if you have thicker lenses, it's not going to work. Now, with that out of the way, that is a good, a good little accessory that I would recommend. But the bigger upgrade is the facial interface with foam replacement set. It comes with a couple foams, one for comfort, one that's they're both a little thicker than what comes with the built-in. The built-in Oculus headset foam is that kind of like not packing peanut, but like the soundproofing sponge foam that's almost like a very porous. It's kind of scratchy. It also becomes a bit of a sweaty mess when you're wearing it, because you are covering up your pores, and eventually you're going to sweat, especially if you're playing some more cardio-active games that require you to stand and move around and stuff. And a solution that a lot of people have had is going out and picking up, and I did initially too, like a $10 or $15 silicone, no-name cover from Amazon that goes over top of it, and the sweat just drips around you, and it's not much more comfortable. In fact, it's kind of rough on your skin, and it's just not overall very well thought out. It's a simple fix, but I don't think it's worth spending the money on that when you can get something better. What this is it's a new interface. It's shaped a little different when it clips into where the headset face mask goes, and it has these sort of Velcro-y replaceable foams that you can put on, and it's like a leatherette sort of smooth memory foamy type face interface, and it's much more cushioned. I found I didn't sweat nearly as much. It allowed my skin to breathe a little better. It's much more comfortable. And then pairing that with their head strap replacement, because the main head strap, the way it comes is you just basically put it over your head, and it has like a top loop and it has a two-side loop, and it sort of makes things ride up a little bit, like especially if you have a larger head. And I had a lot of light coming in through the nose piece, because it doesn't have anything to cover the light where your nose is. With that facial interface, it comes with a flap that sort of covers your nose, so you're not going to get as much light. But also, the head strap replacement is a better quality strap material, and it sort of pops off the old ones. You pop the new one in place on the two side panels, and it comes with an extra loopy loop at the top, sort of to hold things in a little more secure. It's a bit snugger. It doesn't go quite as loose. I'm probably on the upper end of the spectrum of how large of a cranium you're going to want to fit on this thing, but it seemed to just hold a lot better, especially moving around, tilting head left and right. It felt more secure, and then pairing that with the VR cover interface, with the VR interface foam and foam replacement, it comes in a few different colors you can get, which is neat too. It was pretty sweet. And then the sort of piece de resistance to complete it is something that was kind of scary. Is I realized after playing like a couple rounds of Beat Saber that the controller the two hand controllers come with like a little strap at the bottom that's attached to the door of the battery that you wrap around your wrist so that they won't come flying off your hands. But problem is it's kind of loose. It doesn't give a lot of things to grip onto, and it will feel like it's going to fly off your hands. You could easily break it. So you'd want to seek out something with either a little bit better grip or something that can hold your hand in place. Well, they sent over a set of controller grips, and what they do is there's the little hand or wrist strap goes through a little hole in the bottom, and it sort of clips on like a shield on top of the controller itself, and it gives a little bit it's a plasticky texture to it, but it has a finger and upper hand strap that wraps around and will securely hold your hand in place. At the same time, there's like a little cloth cover for it so that it won't be scratchy or anything, and you can tighten it however you want to your preference. And what it allows you to do is when you're playing games where you're flailing your arms around, you've got your your wrist strap on, but this allows it so that you won't accidentally drop your controller. It also means that you can be flinging your hand in different directions and not have to worry at all of it ever coming loose. and there's a couple Velcro-y straps that loop around the ring on the top of the controller that you get a few extra to replace that with, which is pretty sweet. Very comfortable. The only thing that I would say you may have to take them off if you're somebody that invested in like the Anchor Quest certified dock, where it has its own battery charger, because it is something that covers the battery door. But in most cases, what I've found, I've been using these controllers now for several weeks, and I'm still at like 98% battery. And they're using like a single AA, I think it's inside of these guys. It's kind of crazy. So you may be able to get a lot more mileage out of this than you would even with a normal rechargeable, because rechargeables generally have less of a charge than what comes in a good alkaline battery. I think they're kind of essential to get some form of this makeup. I will mention one thing. If you have large glasses, the facial interface and foam replacement set, which is much more comfortable, I could not get my head in with my glasses because my glasses were too wide for the new foam, and that I didn't want to wreck my glasses or wreck the headphones, or sorry, wreck the facial interface. That being said, so that might be something you have to consider, is you may, if you have a larger head, you may not be able to fit glasses in with it. But we were also sent, and it's something I'm working on right now, a prescription lens kit, which is, it's very interesting. They have a sister company that produces, and I'll be talking about this on the next show because I want to take time to review it. And there's a couple companies that do this, but VR Cover is partnered with this company that makes prescription lenses based on your glasses, and they're like clip-ons that go on the inside of and over top of the lenses inside of your Oculus, negating the need for glasses at all. And that should eliminate any discomfort you might have if you have large glasses with it. So I'll be talking about how that sort of pairs together on next week's show. But as it stands, I can say that the quality of the build on this, you're not getting cheap, rubber, cheap plastic. Everything feels as if it could have been a first party, like made by Oculus themselves accessory. You'd be very hard pressed to tell, if the spacer was made by different people at all. Very well put together. It does just work. They come in really nice packaging, and I can see them, and I can see why they're pretty much the leaders right now when it comes to Oculus accessories. I would say definitely check them out. If you are planning to buy an Oculus, you're going to want, at the bare minimum, you're going to want the controller grips for sure. And the rest will all depend on the shape of your head and comfort level and so on and so forth. But I would recommend every single one of them if you've got a big head like me.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Weird news time, and we've got 3 gathered here from Birdman's procurement of the weird and wacky and just plain fucked up, as he always liked to say. First and foremost, we have something from a source that we're not usually used to grabbing, from the Canadian Weather Network. So on the weathernetwork.com, we have an article here saying internet down in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, after beaver chews through fiber cable. Originally reported on by the CBC, and with a more extensive article here from the Weather Network, it says, TELUS calls damage uniquely Canadian turn of events, afflicting roughly 900 customers, or 900 homes. Internet service was down for about 900 customers in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, after a beaver chewed through a crucial fiber cable, causing extensive damage. In a statement, TELUS spokesperson Liz Suave wrote that in a very bizarre and uniquely Canadian turn of events, crews found that a beaver chewed through the cable at multiple points, causing the internet to go down on Saturday, this past Saturday at 4 a.m. Our team located a nearby dam, and it appears the beaver dug underground alongside the creek to reach our cable, which is buried 3 feet underground and protected by a 4.5-inch thick conduit. The beavers first chewed through the conduit before chewing through the cable on multiple locations, the statement said. Suave said the photo that a photo from the site appeared to show the beavers using Telus materials to build their home. She said the image shows fiber markings tape, usually buried in the ground on top of their dam. Crews brought in additional equipment and technicians to help expose the cable, determine how far the damage continued up the line. The statement said the conditions were challenging because the ground above the cable is partially frozen. The company said it restored service by around 3:30 p.m. on Sunday. It had warned that cell phone service in the area was likely to be spotty until the new cable was repaired. Oh, so it wasn't just like an internet one. It was the full fiber line, the trunk cable that they used to go to their towers even. Tumbler Ridge is a municipality of northeastern British Columbia with a population of about 2,000 people. So just about 40% of their entire population had no internet. It means all businesses and everything too. Because it sounds like up there, like unlike here where it's like Rogers, Bell, and that, it sounds like if 40% of their customers were out, that means that they must have the dominant cell and internet service up there with them. So that's kind of crazy. That kind of reminds me of that story. What was it? It's been posted a few times. Was it about a snowmobile or something with a flying bear? Or flying moose? Something or other. Flying moose? Snowmobile, maybe? I don't remember the story. Somebody might be able to bring it up, but I know we reported on it, and it was because it had become sort of an internet meme because it was an article about this, and somebody said, "Oh, that doesn't usually happen that often here." And somebody goes, "What do you mean that often?" And it's one of those sorts of Canadianisms. But yeah, so if your internet goes down, it's not necessarily that a line broke or a car crashed into it or server failure. It could be that a beaver decided to build a home and tear apart your internet infrastructure. So our next story here comes from 680 News in Toronto. 680, is that Toronto? Not 100% sure. I know it's Canadian. So 680 News. It says here, an alligator crashes Toronto FC practice in Florida. It makes sense. It's not that it's in Canada, at least, because that wouldn't make any sense. But it says here, not that they needed a reminder that they're a long way from home, but Toronto FC, or Toronto Football Club, players had an alligator crash their practice in Florida on Monday. And it says, all I can tell you is this. There was an alligator, a massive alligator, Toronto coach Chris Armas said. And my players are running towards the alligator as I went the other way. Listen, we talk about fearless and aggressive around here, but I thought we would not think about that at that moment. It's maybe par for the course here in Florida when you're by the water, but I think it was cool for the guys to see really close up and personal. It was kind of a cool way to start training. On Monday, the club posted a photo of striker Josie Altidore observing the alligator from a safe distance as it wandered past someone in a nearby golf cart. Toronto FC, or TFC, which is based out of Ontario due to the pandemic-related travel restrictions, will welcome a different kind of foe Tuesday when Mexico's Cruz Azul comes to visit for the first leg of their Scotiabank CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinal. Good Lord, I don't know enough about soccer. The game is to be held behind closed doors at Tampa's Raymond James Stadium, home to the Super Bowl champions Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The second leg is scheduled for May 4th at Mexico City's historic Azteca Stadium. Cruz Azul tops the Liga MX standings, yada, 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 sports talk. They've been hard to beat. Field position. Goes into a lot of sports talky. And then who's trading, yada, yada. Just basically, I know that a lot of our teams were not allowed to play up in Canada because of travel restrictions. So there's a few teams. I think it was the Blue Jays made their home down. Is it either Texas or Florida as well? That they've been gracious enough and they worked out a deal or whatever so they could host our teams, because otherwise we weren't going to be able to play with the borders closed. So cool and creepy So for the players watching, they're like, "This is a gator." It's like people have got to forget those things can move a lot faster than you'd expect. So you might want to keep your eye out. And for our final story here, Berman got this from uprocks.com. It's from their movie section. It says here, Citizen Kane lost its perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes, making Paddington 2 the greatest movie of all time. What? It's been a rough week for Herman J. Mankiewicz, better known as Mank. The Netflix film bearing his name won only 2 of the 10 Academy Awards it was nominated for: Best Cinematography, Best Production Design, but it's still one more Oscar than Citizen Kane won in 1942. It famously lost Best Picture, then called Outstanding Motion Picture, to the dreadfully boring How Green Was My Valley. I've tried watching that movie, and even if you don't have the attention span to sit through Citizen Kane, that's a really boring movie. Mank's masterpiece won Orson Welles. With Orson Welles, is no longer part of the 100% club on Rotten Tomatoes, which would annoy the 2 writers if they knew what the internet was and if they weren't long dead. Of the 116 reviews for Citizen Kane, the critical aggregation website, 115 were positive and 1 is negative. That one was published 80 years ago in the Chicago Tribune under the headline, Citizen Kane fails to impress critics as greatest ever filmed. As noted by Boing Boing, it was written by May Tenay, a collective pseudonym then used by one of the paper's film critics. So, Matt Tenay. Yeah, why was it added to Rotten Tomatoes in 2021? It was late. It was updated between late February and mid-April. It's unclear, but my theory is that Wells owed money to the grandfather of someone who works at Rotten Tomatoes. Wouldn't surprise me. It's a joke. Here's an excerpt. You've heard a lot of this about this picture, and I see by the ads that some experts think it's the greatest movie ever made. I don't. It's interesting. It's different. In fact, it's bizarre enough to become a museum piece. But its sacrifice of simplicity to eccentricity robs it of distinction and general entertainment value. I'll be honest, it's a lot better than 99% of movies that came out back then, and they just maybe weren't sophisticated enough to understand it. But it says Paddington 2 is a better film than Citizen Kane. Based on this. So what people aren't getting is Rotten Tomatoes will give you a general idea of whether you'll like it or not. It's not a score of how good a movie is. It's an aggregate score. So what that means is that percentage, it's percentage of people that like it. So it's not the qualitative work, it's the quantitative amount. So it's like, hey, 99% of film critics say this is great. That means that I should think that this is at least a 5.5 or better out of 10 in my own head when you go to see that. You go, I am very likely to enjoy myself if it's above X amount of score. That doesn't mean that certain films that have like a 30% you might not love. You might love those films. It's just they didn't resonate with the majority of critics. But you might be somebody who's into a specific genre or a specific actor that's not, that isn't somebody that other people like. So what you have to do is you look at that and go, there's my score. Okay, it's 99% or 100%. Okay, so every critic likes it. Then you have to delineate and go down and go, are there other critics that have a similar taste and style to what I view and think? And then you go, okay, let's look at what they individually said. That's what it's meant for, but I think too many people view this as Rotten Tomatoes giving it a score, meaning it's the best of all time from everybody saying it. It's not what it is. Even though, obviously, for years in film schools, they always said that this was the best film ever made, and it's really not. It's probably the most important film made in the 40s. Up to that point, I think it's the most important film for moving the industry forward. But as far as best film, it's not. Orson Welles would tell you that it is because he was a self-centered son of a bitch, but it was not. It was probably the best technical film up to that point, and maybe even after, if you take out some of the more German expressionism stuff. But if you look from a pure filmmaking, like, technique standpoint, it was the best at the time. But does it stand up to, like, Schindler's List or something now? No, it doesn't. Not even close. But it is an important film, so we have to give it its reverence. And that's going to do it for the weird news. We're going to take a quick break, go into another review, and then we're going to come back at the end and sort of give a bit of an update on what's going on the site, and if there's any news that we missed from the time of recording, the regular news, if there's something to do with gaming or any breaking news, we'll be talking there before we close out the show.
Basically using geeks.
Leave me alone, geek boy.
Holy shit, you geeks are badass.
Okay, where do I start here? This is a title that just came out on the Oculus platform that has been in our radar since we first started keeping an eye on things a couple years back at the last E3 when we watched the VR. I think it was the VR showcase for the first time, and we were like, oh, things are starting to move into the direction where it can be like high quality releases. Well, Wraith The Oblivion Afterlife was one of the titles shown there that's sort of been in the back of our minds. And now that we have the ability to actually play these titles in VR, we jumped on the chance to contact the developers and publishers of the game to see Fast Travel Games, that is, to see if we could maybe get a chance to check it out. And they sent over a review code, which actually was a dual purchase, I guess, where you activate the code and you get both the version that works with the Quest, which is native, that downloads directly to the device, and if you go and load the Oculus store on your PC, it gets you the Rift version, which uses your PC to do the computations. And I've said it before, I have a 1080p, high-end 1080p gaming card that can do some VR, especially if it's not too complex. And in doing the comparison here, there wasn't any big visual settings I could set on the PC version that was going over Oculus Link to it. And I will say that while it worked, like it did work through my PC, it seemed to clear up a little bit of some, I don't know, crushing levels and maybe some color levels a tiny bit better. It was overall a little more washed out, and I did notice, not any screen door effect, but I did notice some frame rate hiccuping. So my computer setup, which is a Ryzen 6 core, it's like a $1,000 PC, $1,200 PC, is struggling to run it at the frame rate required for both eyes of 72 hertz or higher. So it worked just fine. So if you're somebody who has a Rift, you're going to want to make sure you have maybe a beefier GPU. Maybe I have a Radeon 5500 XT. If you are going on the AMD side, you might want to jump up to the 5700. Spending a couple $100 more. Well, when prices go to normal and you can actually get them, something like that, the 5600 or 5700, or if you're still rocking, the RX 580 probably would be a good brand. And then if you've got a more modern card from NVIDIA, something like a 1660 or a 2060 would obviously be able to do it no problem. But if you had like a 1660 Super, probably where you'd want to go to run a game like this with the proper frame rate and everything. As is, though, in the Oculus platform itself, playing the native code was flawless. Creepy as all hell. The representative that sent over the code said, we recommend you using headphones and earbuds or whatever, like good headphones, and cranking it way up to max volume. And all I can say is you, sir, are an asshole, because this game was too scary for me to do that. I did it for a couple hours and then realized that my heart rate was going up too much and my blood pressure was going up, and I'm somebody who actually has to take blood pressure medication. So I had to do the wimpy thing and unplug my headphones and use the built-in stereo audio that comes with the headset just to hear what was going on there. And even then I had some things popping up. It is light on the pop-up scares. You're not going to get a ton of those. You might get a thing that like startles you for a second, but there's not a ton of that, like, going to give you a heart attack kind of thing. But it is a very creepy atmosphere. Now, what is Wraith The Oblivion. It's based on the World of Darkness collection of games that were out back in the 90s that we've talked about on the show here. We've interviewed some of the people that wrote those books. And this is a VR horror exploration game. You play as one of the Wraiths. You're somebody who's... You're an undead person with supernatural abilities. It took me about 9 hours to beat. It can take you a little more, a little less, depending on how you play it, and if you want to do absolutely everything in it. And there's multiple save files, so you can start multiple playthroughs or share it with somebody who wants to have the same headset. You play as Ed Miller. You're a photographer hired to chronicle a seance in Hollywood, Howard Barclay's mansion. Now, like I said, it is light on the jump scares, but it is very big on setting a creepy atmosphere and tension. You'll be walking through things and you'll be seeing sort of vestiges and of people talking, like shadows of what happened in the past. And you're getting items to interact with the mansion itself, open things up, move things around. You're guided sort of by your self-conscious, but it's called the shadow. You'll encounter other specters, which are lost souls, to take on different monstrous forms. As you progress through, you'll sort of uncover the truth. It's really like a modern, like a fully VR interactive point-and-click adventure like horror game. It's really neat. You will find a bunch of weird items that help you reveal different memories and overcome weird obstacles. It's a well-put-together game. Probably one of the more premium experiences that are available on the platform. Might get more people into the whole World of Darkness stuff, especially since it's been in the news recently that they're working on creating a World of Darkness TV and movie shared universe with the success especially of the books being revived, as well as there's been some games and other properties come out recently. Most recently, we reviewed on the show the Werewolf the Apocalypse game, and we're surprised at how high quality it was for a smaller budget game with a very focused scope. And that is what this is too. It's very focused in its execution, and it knows what it needs to do, and they didn't go like way over budget trying to add things that were unnecessary. The graphics are really good. The audio and atmosphere is fantastic. Controls are pretty good. I would like to have been able to move a little faster, but that adds to the whole feel of the game. You are picking things up and moving around and pivoting, and you can adjust some comfort levels for certain things as well. You can adjust the brightness. But as I said, in the PC version, I couldn't find anything that would allow me to adjust any graphical settings. You're sort of just set as is. Maybe it auto detects what you can do, or it has a set minimum that it just needs to be at to play. But very well done, Fast Travel Games. I hope that you do more in this franchise, or that maybe you jump into some other World of Darkness type of games, or if this is just sort of a one-off to be like a proof of concept of what you can do, it would be really interesting to see something like this on a mainline console, like maybe down the line on whatever the PlayStation VR 2 would be. But as it is, it's going to be one of the, I would say it's one of the killer apps, one of the top 5 games you should probably get if you're using an Oculus Quest 2. That is a game that plays natively on there. It's something that you can really show off what that headset can do.
Those magnificent bastards. Color me kooky, but something very odd is going on around here.
You're not allowed to talk anymore.
And that's going to do it for the show this week. Interesting games as well as accessories here. As far as the news goes, it was a little light, I think, on the heavy news overall. And I had mentioned in the news segments that if there was anything that popped up in the PlayStation State of Play that they put out, I just finished watching it before finishing the recording here, and it wasn't like a groundbreaking big State of Play. I do have a couple thoughts on it, thinking that it was a little weird that as of this recording and as of the airing of the State of Play, the game sorry, the game Returnal is coming out, within like 12 hours of when they recorded or when they broadcast the State of Play, but there was no mention of it, yet there's a 28-minute video they released after the State of Play that is a deep dive into the gameplay mechanics and how the game works for Returnal. Not advertised at all in the State of Play. It's just sort of weird. Like, you would have figured they would have said, hey, we're going to focus 15 minutes of gameplay on the upcoming Ratchet & Clank and a deep dive into this. But no, they separated them into two different videos. There was a sprinkling of two little indie titles to talk about. They talked about Subnautica getting a PS5 version, and then they also showed that, what's that big game called? Why am I drawing a blank on it? Was it Among Us? I think that's what it's called. Is getting a PS4 and PS5 version with some Ratchet & Clank goodies for free when you get the PlayStation platform versions. And then they went into Ratchet & Clank, which is looking fantastic. I saw some people not really understanding what the video was because they're like, oh, it seems choppy. No. First of all, the bit rate was pretty low on their stream for a 1080p 60 stream, but at the same time, the game was playing clearly at 30 FPS because they had it with full-blown ray tracing on everything. I don't know if they're going to have a mode in there that is 60 FPS with ray tracing off or a balanced mode, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do because Spider-Man had that. But then again, this is built from the ground up. Maybe the intention is to just have full ray tracing on maximum and then just have it at 30 FPS. If that's the case, I think it looks fine. Even though the previous game got that upgrade to boost to 60. As much as 60 would be great in this, I think the visuals really, really take advantage of the lighting, the shading, and all the ray tracing that's done in it. So I could see them saying, for artistic choices, not having that mode. But it looks fantastic. It looks seamless. The loading times are great. We're about, 4-6 weeks away from the release. It sounds like it's coming out right around E3 or right at E3. If I double check, maybe right after. They said there'll be a little more to come to discuss on the game. So I'm assuming there's going to be one more video showing off things at the very end. Maybe if E3 is happening, showcase beforehand, maybe one last push. Or if it's coming out after, then I'm assuming they'll have a little video at beforehand just to give it a tiny push. Because this seems to be the big first party title that they want to push to everybody. Let's be honest, Demon's Souls is for a certain hardcore audience, but even then it's sectioned out into a very particular audience that would want to play that. And at the same time, while it was visually very appealing and the first look at what real next-gen could be, it is still based on the core of a game that is almost 20 years old now. So while visually fantastic, it didn't take advantage of a lot of what the system could really do because it was more of a tech demo of sorts. And then Returnal being the only other, I would say, exclusive next-gen title to come out, that like full-fledged title, is coming out this week or this past week when you've heard this. And it being a medium-budget title, this is really the first real, true next-gen exclusive title that is touted to take advantage of everything that the system is able to do. Now, of course, we're going to see games come out in 2025 and 2026 that are really like when they've hit their stride and making the maximum use out of everything that the system can do. But this is the first flagship title. We haven't had a Halo come out or anything on Xbox. There hasn't, the Medium has come out. There's been a few titles that, are either multi-gen or they're on PC as well. This is really the test. Show us what a system can do that you can't do anywhere else right now. And it seems to be the one that they're trying to showcase. And they were trying to really, really showcase the audio. I don't have the Pulse 3D headset. I think my Creative SXFi, whatever it's called, headset that works for PC and PS4. It has 3D in it where it takes image mapping of your ear and all that. It's supposed to be compatible, but I don't know if it's got there might have to be a driver update or something. But I'm waiting on a big gift card to come in the mail, and if I don't end up using it to get an Apple TV, the newest edition, then I'll probably end up using it to get that Pulse 3D headset, because I've listened to, I'm a bit of an audiophile, not an audio snob, but to me it's like I'll buy a cheap Chinese headphone if it sounds better than anything else in the market. I don't care. Or at least sounds better to me. And I do have a decent ear for frequencies that sometimes people don't necessarily hear or notice, especially, or if it's like tonally off. And I've listened to a lot of the pseudo 3D or fake 3D or algorithmic 3D headphones. The Creative Trio that was the earbuds were pretty close to being good-ish, but I still preferred to turn off that effect entirely and just leave them in the flat mode and then use equalizer settings on my own. The Pulse 3D headset is the only headset I've ever tried, and I tried it at Michael's once before we had lockdown, and I haven't been back since, where listening to them, when you turn the mode on, it didn't have that crappy hollow sound, that horrible tinny, compressed garbage fake surround from somebody who's used to hearing things in actual surround with a good audio setup. It actually sounded not like as good as if you had these giant cans on that had individual speakers spaced around your ear or something, but that to this day doesn't even exist. They tried doing that in the early 2000s with headphones and they just sounded like crap. These sound really good, and that was just with playing Astro's Playroom. So I can imagine another game that's been developed to really truly utilize it. It might be something that pushes people to get that, especially if you're playing in a house and you have a good surround set like I do, which I got on the cheap anyway by just picking up the absolute best speakers I could within my budget. Great, but most people, let's be honest, most people barely even have a sound bar. I would say that like 75% of homes that have PlayStation hooked up, they might have this expensive TV, a really high-end TV, and they'll have a really good gaming system, but then they never invest in anything either more than a soundbar or even just use the TV audio, which is atrocious. TV audio hasn't sounded good since we had projection TVs where you had these large speakers built into them. I would actually rather not watch TV or play any games on TV at all if I didn't have a speaker hooked up or good headphones than play at all. So this might be something that if you're not able to space-wise or money-wise or even just you don't want to invest in at least a good soundbar with subwoofer or a proper surround sound set, those headphones at the $120 or so, whatever their price point is, are probably going to be an entry point for a lot of people with spatial audio that have never really had anything other than stereo audio. So I might, again, depending, I'll look into maybe getting a pair of them, because I feel like that's really going to be a game changer when it comes to the first party titles on Sony, if they start taking advantage of the surround sound with the, like, specifically making profiles to work with the Tempest engine. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the state of play. I know that we're going to have some more gaming stuff leading up to E3, and we're going to, even though we're technically on hiatus right now from doing prototype episodes till Birdman is back, we might have one or two in between if there's something big that pops up. But we'll definitely go back when E3 starts. We'll have our multi-coverage because it's going to be spread out. We'll be doing probably one for each day of E3, or covering each of the conferences like we've done in previous years. So it'll be interesting. And then if there's a Summer of Gaming, we'll end up doing, was it Summer Game Fest? That's what it was. Any of the bigger press events we'll do a prototype on, so it'll be a summer of prototypes for sure. As far as what else is coming this week, depending on when I get home, I'll be recording another loose cannon on a couple Jackie Chan movies with Aaron, but this come up in a couple days should be another Earth vs. Soup episode, and then depending on how many review items come in and how much I work on it, this coming Friday might be another Turd or Treasure episode or another syndicated episode from some other people. But it's all going to be dependent on what comes in the mail. I actually have to go to the post office for the first time in a very long time and pick up some package that could be one of multiple items that I'm not sure. It gave me the origin as Scarborough, which I'm like, okay, my family lives in Scarborough, and I called a few family members, was like, we didn't send you anything, and I'm like, oh, so it could be from a warehouse like a drop shipment warehouse of one of these companies. I am expecting some products from Soundcore and I think a robotic vacuum to check out, but I'm not sure if that's what that is. It could also be an Amigo package with Megazone in there. It could be something else entirely. Who knows? It'd be hilarious if I get there and it's just an envelope that required a signature or something. But it's a little out of the way. It takes me an hour and a half to get there because of the bus transit situation, and if I had a car, it would be 10 minutes. So visiting my family, interestingly enough, is roughly the same time to get there and back, but it's 2 buses that are just like straight away to there instead of like a lot of walking, and it's going to be rainy this whole week, so I figured I'd go pick it up then. So that's basically what's up here. I know Birdman said he has some stuff that came in the mail. He's going to be slowly working at his own pace on a few reviews, and we might have something for next week's show. We'll see what happens. And planning on watching a bunch of movies. We've got some streaming press copies to watch from VVS Films, the first time since like October. So I'll be watching some of that and talking about it. And we also have... The contest ended, and emails will be sent, I think, a day before or the day of to everybody who entered that won a free early viewing of Jupiter's... was it Jupiter? Why am I drawing a blank on that right now? On the brand new Netflix show, Where are we here? It's late at night. I'm having trouble remembering. Jupiter's Legacy, that's what it was. So I believe it's either the day of or the day before you'll get an email if they've received your information from us, and then it'll give you a screening link to watch. So you can watch the first episode a day early. A little fancy, a little fun. We might be doing some more contests like that coming up in the future, so that'll be neat. You'll have to stay tuned for that. And that's going to do it. I'll talk to everybody later.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.